The mark on my wrist was supposed to be impossible. It died 3 years ago with the Alpha King's murdered Luna. But when he stormed into my cottage, bleeding from a poisoned blade meant to kill apex predators, his silver eyes locked onto my skin and everything stopped. He seized my arm with terrifying strength, his wolf snarling recognition as the crescent moon birthmark began to glow, and his voice came out barely human. "Where did you get this? Who are you really?" Because that mark wasn't just rare. It was the mark of the first moon, proof of royal bloodline blessed by the goddess herself, and somehow I wore the face of a dead queen he'd watched die screaming beneath a blood moon. Welcome back, my amazing viewers. Before we dive deeper into the story, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment below telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love seeing how far our stories reach. All right, settle in, take a breath, and let's get back to it. The storm came like a wolf, hungry, relentless, and impossible to ignore. Thunder rolled across the witherwood in waves, shaking the ancient pines until their branches clawed at the sky. Rain hammered against the thatched roof of the small stone cottage, tucked deep in the cursed forest, where no pack dared to tread and no law dared to follow. This was the land of the forgotten, the exiled, the dying, and Aria Thorne had made it her sanctuary. Inside the cottage, firelight flickered against walls lined with dried herbs, glass vials, and weapons she hoped she'd never have to use. The air was thick with the scent of wolfsbane and feverfew, underlaid with something darker, the metallic tang of fresh blood. Aria knelt beside the wooden table where a rogue wolf lay dying. His name had been Marcus. Or maybe it was Matthias. She couldn't remember anymore. They all blurred together after a while, the outcasts who stumbled to her door with arrows in their backs and betrayal in their eyes, seeking the one healer in the borderlands who asked no questions and demanded no allegiance. She'd tried to save him. She'd stitched the gash across his ribs, forced healing tonics past his cracked lips, whispered prayers to a goddess she wasn't sure was listening. It hadn't been enough. His chest had stopped rising 10 minutes ago. Aria sat back on her heels, blood-stained hands trembling in her lap. Her dark hair clung to her face, damp with sweat and rain from when she'd dragged him inside hours earlier. Exhaustion pulled at her bones, but it was the guilt that weighed heaviest. Another one. Another life I couldn't save. She closed her eyes and let the grief wash over her, not because she'd known him, but because she knew what it meant to be alone, to be cast out, to die in the dark with no one to remember your name. The fire crackled, the storm raged, and then the door exploded inward. Aria's eyes snapped open as wood splintered and cold wind tore through the cottage, scattering herbs and extinguishing half the candles in a single violent gust. 3 figures filled the doorway. The first 2 were warriors, broad-shouldered, armed, their eyes glowing amber with the light of their wolves barely leashed beneath their skin. They moved with the lethal grace of predators, scanning the room for threats. But it was the 3rd figure that stole the breath from Aria's lungs. He was massive. Even hunched and bleeding, he dominated the space like a force of nature. His cloak was torn and mud-splattered, hanging from shoulders that could bear the weight of a kingdom. Dark hair fell across a face carved from stone and shadow, sharp jaw, brutal cheekbones, and eyes that burned silver in the firelight. Silver. Not amber. Silver. Aria's pulse spiked. She knew what that meant. Only one bloodline carried silver eyes. The royal line. Alpha King Kael Draven. He took one step into the cottage and nearly collapsed. One of the warriors caught him, but Kael shoved him off with a snarl that was more wolf than man. "Leave it," he growled, his voice like gravel and smoke. "Find me a healer or get out of my way." "My lord, you need— now!" The command cracked through the air like a whip. Both warriors flinched but didn't argue. Their eyes found Aria, still kneeling beside the dead rogue, her hands covered in blood. She should have been terrified. She should have bowed, apologized, explained that she was just a rogue healer with no ties to any pack, least of all his. Instead, she stood. "Close the door," she said quietly, wiping her hands on her already ruined tunic. "You're letting the storm in." One of the warriors gaped at her. The other looked ready to drag her outside by her hair for daring to give orders in the presence of their king. But Kael was staring at her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. "You're the healer?" His voice was rough, strained with pain. "I'm a healer." Aria moved toward him, her instincts overriding her common sense. "What happened?" "Ambush, border skirmish with the Nightfang pack." He pressed a hand to his ribs, and when he pulled it away, his palm was slick with black. Aria's stomach dropped, black blood. "Poison," she breathed. "You were hit with a poisoned blade." "Brilliant observation." Kael's lip curled, but there was no real venom in it, just the desperate sarcasm of a man trying not to show how much pain he was in. "Can you fix it or not?" Aria didn't answer. She grabbed his arm and hauled him toward the table, shoving Marcus's body aside without ceremony. The dead didn't need her anymore. The living, barely, still did. "Sit," she ordered. To her shock, he obeyed. Kael dropped onto the bench with a grunt, and Aria immediately went to work. She tore open his shredded shirt, revealing a torso covered in scars, some old and silver, others fresh and angry. But it was the wound beneath his ribs that made her breath catch. The flesh around the gash was turning gray, spreading like roots from the puncture. Shadow thorn venom. Rare. Illegal. Designed to kill apex predators. Designed to kill kings. "This is going to hurt," she warned. "Everything hurts," Kael muttered. "Just do it." Aria reached for her supplies, silver shears, white willow bark, a vial of distilled moonbloom extract. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency, cutting away dead tissue, pressing poultices against the wound, muttering incantations her mentor had taught her years ago. She was so focused on saving his life that she didn't notice when his gaze dropped to her wrist, didn't notice when his entire body went rigid, didn't notice when his hand shot out and seized her arm. Aria gasped as iron fingers clamped around her wrist, yanking her hand into the firelight. She tried to pull back, but his grip was unyielding. Not cruel, but absolutely unbreakable. "What are you? Where did you get this?" His voice was barely human. It was the sound of a wolf caught between fury and disbelief, between hope and horror. Aria's heart hammered as she followed his gaze down to her inner wrist, to the mark she'd been born with, the crescent moon. It was small, no larger than a thumbprint, etched into her skin in silvery lines that looked almost like a scar. She'd had it her entire life. Her mentor had told her it was a birthmark, nothing more. But the way Kael was staring at it, like he'd seen a ghost, told her it was anything but ordinary. "I was born with it," Aria said, her voice shaking. "It's just a—" "No." Kael's eyes lifted to hers, and the raw anguish in them stole her words. "It's not just anything." The mark began to glow. Aria watched in horror as the crescent moon flared with pale silver light, warm against her skin. It had never done that before. Never. And then she felt it. The pull. Like an invisible thread connecting her wrist to his chest, humming with recognition, with power. Kael's wolf snarled inside him. She could hear it, a low, primal sound that vibrated through his grip and into her bones. "Who are you?" His voice dropped to a whisper, but it was no less terrifying for its softness. "Who are you really?" I don't understand. That mark." His thumb brushed over the glowing crescent, and Aria shivered despite herself. "That mark died with my Luna 3 years ago." The world tilted. Aria's mind raced, trying to make sense of his words, but they didn't fit. They couldn't fit. She was nobody, a rogue healer with no family, no pack, no past beyond the life her mentor had given her. She couldn't be. Kael's face went pale. His grip on her wrist loosened, and Aria realized with dawning horror that the poison was spreading faster now, crawling up his veins like black lightning. Kael! His name left her lips before she could stop it, and his silver eyes widened in surprise. Then he collapsed. Aria barely caught him as he fell forward, his weight dragging them both to the floor. She knelt there, cradling the Alpha King's head in her lap, her wrist still glowing with the mark of a dead queen. And in the silence between thunderclaps, she heard him whisper, Selene. The name of his murdered Luna. The name of a woman Aria had never met. The name of a ghost that somehow was reaching from beyond the grave to claim her. Panic was a luxury Aria Thorne couldn't afford. She'd learned that lesson years ago, the night her mentor died in her arms with nothing but cryptic warnings and a bundle of forbidden grimoires left behind. She'd learned it again with every rogue who bled out on her table despite her best efforts. But kneeling on the cold stone floor with an unconscious Alpha King in her lap and a glowing mark burning against her wrist, this was different. Don't you dare die on me, Aria hissed, pressing her fingers against Kael's throat. His pulse was there, faint and irregular, fighting against the shadowthorn venom spreading through his veins like liquid death. The two warriors crashed through the doorway, weapons drawn, eyes wild with barely restrained panic. My lord! The taller one, dark-haired with a scar across his jaw, dropped to his knees beside them. What did you do to him? I'm trying to save him. Aria didn't look up, her hands already reaching for the moonbloom extract. Hold him down. This is going to hurt. She didn't wait for permission. She poured the shimmering liquid directly into the wound, and Kael's entire body convulsed. His back arched off the floor, a guttural sound tearing from his throat, half-human scream, half-wolf's howl. The warriors held him as Aria worked with desperate precision, her hands glowing with the same silvery light as her mark. She didn't understand it, didn't have time to question it. She just let the power flow, channeling it into the poison, burning it out cell by cell. Minutes felt like hours, and then, finally, the black veins began to recede. Kael's breathing steadied, his color returned, and those silver eyes fluttered open, fixing on her face with an intensity that made her pulse spike. You, he rasped. You saved me. Don't sound so surprised. Aria pulled back, suddenly aware of how close they were. It's literally what I do. She stood, putting distance between them, but Kael was already pushing himself upright with a grimace. His warriors moved to help, but he waved them off with the same stubborn pride that had nearly gotten him killed. Everyone out, he ordered, his voice rough but steady. I need to speak with the healer. Alone. My lord, that's not... Out! The command left no room for argument. The warriors exchanged worried glances, but obeyed, retreating into the storm. The door clicked shut, and suddenly the cottage felt impossibly small. Kael stood slowly, testing his weight, his gaze never leaving Aria. The firelight played across his features, sharp, brutal, and carved from the kind of grief that never quite healed. Show me again, he said quietly. The mark. Aria's hand instinctively covered her wrist. I already told you. It's just a birthmark. Whatever you think it means everything. Kael crossed the space between them in 2 strides, and Aria found herself backed against the herb-lined wall. He wasn't touching her, but his presence was overwhelming, raw power barely leashed beneath scarred skin. I'm not her, Aria said, hating how her voice shook. I'm not your Luna. I know. Pain flickered across his face like lightning. Selene is dead. I watched her die. The name hung between them like a blade. Kael's eyes went distant, lost in memory. 3 years ago, beneath the blood moon, she was investigating something, missing wolves, children vanishing from royal bloodlines. She wouldn't tell me the details, said it was too dangerous, that she needed proof before bringing it to the council. His hand came up, almost touching Aria's wrist, but stopping just short. The night she died, I felt it through our bond. The terror, the agony. By the time I reached her, she was already gone. Throat torn out. The mark on her wrist still glowing with the last of her magic. Aria's breath caught. I'm sorry. But that doesn't explain the mark of the first moon. Kael's voice dropped to barely a whisper. It appears only on those descended from the original pack, the wolves blessed by the moon goddess herself. Selene bore it. Her mother bore it. It's been passed down through the royal bloodline for 1,000 years. He finally looked at her, really looked at her, and Aria saw the war raging behind those silver eyes. Grief, suspicion, and something else, something that felt dangerously like hope. So, either you're somehow connected to the royal line, he said slowly, or... A howl split the night. Both their heads snapped toward the door. It wasn't the sound of Kael's warriors. This was different. Wild, ravenous, filled with the kind of hunger that turned wolves into monsters. Rogues, Aria breathed. Kael was already moving, drawing a silver dagger from his belt. How many? Too many. Aria had heard that sound before. Packs of exiled wolves, driven mad by starvation and rejection, descending on anything that smelled of weakness. The cottage door shuddered under the first impact. Wood cracked, claws scraped against stone. Outside, Kael's warriors were shouting, steel clashing against fang and claw. But the sounds were growing more desperate, more outnumbered. We need to move, Kael growled. Now! There's nowhere to go. Aria's mind raced through her options, all of them bad. The cottage had 1 door, 2 windows, and 30 rogues between them and safety. Another impact. The doorframe splintered, and something inside Aria snapped. She didn't think, didn't plan. She just reached for the same silvery power that had saved Kael's life and pulled. Get down, she shouted. Kael hit the floor as Aria thrust both hands forward. The mark on her wrist blazed like a star, and silver fire erupted from her palms. Not normal fire, but something older, something primal. It roared outward in a perfect circle, forming a shimmering barrier around the cottage. The rogues hit it and screamed. The sound was inhuman, agonized, as the silver flames burned away their corruption without consuming their flesh. They fell back, yelping and snarling, unable to cross the threshold. Aria stood at the center of the inferno, her dark hair whipping around her face, her eyes glowing the same impossible silver as the mark on her wrist. She'd never done anything like this before, didn't even know she could. Behind her, she heard Kael rise to his feet, felt his stare burning into her back. What? He said carefully. Are you? I don't know. Aria's voice shook, but the barrier held steady, pulsing with ancient power. I swear to the goddess, I don't know. The rogues circled the cottage like sharks, testing the barrier, searching for weakness. But wherever they touched the silver fire, they recoiled with howls of pain. Minutes passed. Then the rogues began to retreat, melting back into the witherwood, driven off by a power they couldn't comprehend. When the last of them disappeared, Aria let the barrier fall. She swayed, exhaustion crashing over her, and Kael caught her elbow before she could collapse. Easy, he murmured. I've got you. Aria pulled away, wrapping her arms around herself. The mark on her wrist had stopped glowing, but she could still feel it humming beneath her skin, awake now, aware, waiting. The door opened. Kael's warriors stumbled in, bloodied but alive, their eyes wide with shock as they stared at Aria. Kael straightened, every inch the Alpha King once more. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of absolute authority. Gather the wounded, prepare the horses. His silver eyes found Aria's, and she saw the decision already made. She comes with me. What? Aria's head snapped up. No, I'm not going anywhere with you. The council will see this. He gestured to her wrist, his expression unreadable. They need to know that the mark of the first moon has appeared again, on someone with power like yours. I'm not some prize to be paraded. You're a mystery. Kael stepped closer, his voice dropping to something almost gentle, one that might finally explain what happened to my Luna, to all those missing wolves, and whether you like it or not. He reached out, his fingers hovering over the mark that refused to stop glowing. You're connected to this. To Selene. To me. Aria wanted to argue, to run, to disappear into the witherwood and never look back. But as thunder rolled overhead and rain hammered against the roof, she knew the truth. Her quiet life was over, and the ghost of a dead queen was pulling her toward a throne she'd never wanted, and a king who looked at her like she was both his salvation and his destruction. Blackridge Keep rose from the mountains like a crown of thorns, beautiful, brutal, and built to withstand the weight of eternity. Aria had seen it from a distance once, years ago, when she'd still traveled with her mentor. Even then, it had seemed less like a palace and more like a warning. This is where power lives. Tread carefully. Now, riding through its gates with an armed escort, and the Alpha King's silver eyes watching her every move, that warning felt like a noose tightening around her throat. The courtyard erupted in controlled chaos the moment they arrived. Servants rushed forward, healers appeared with supplies, warriors formed ranks, their gazes sliding over Aria with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. She was still wearing her blood-stained tunic, still covered in mud and ash from the rogue attack, still feeling the phantom burn of silver fire in her palms, still not one of them. "Take her to the East Tower," Kael ordered, dismounting with the fluid grace of someone born to command. "Post guards. No one enters without my permission." "My lord." His beta, the scarred warrior from the cottage, stepped forward. His name was Ronan. Aria had learned during the long ride. "The council is already demanding an audience. They've heard rumors about the mark." "Let them demand." Kael's voice was ice. "I'll address the council when I'm ready, not before." Ronan's jaw tightened, but he bowed. Then his dark eyes found Aria, and she saw something flicker there. Not quite fear, but close. Recognition of something he wished he didn't understand. "Is it true?" he asked quietly. "Does she bear the mark of the first moon?" Kael's silence was answer enough. Ronan exhaled slowly, like a man watching storm clouds gather on the horizon. "Then the prophecy awakens. The goddess help us all." Before Aria could ask what prophecy he meant, guards were escorting her away. She glanced back once and found Kael still watching her, his expression unreadable, a king carved from stone and shadow, haunted by ghosts only he could see. The East Tower was a prison dressed as luxury, silk curtains, velvet cushions, a four-poster bed that could sleep three, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the kingdom spread below like a tapestry of forest and flame. But the guards outside her door and the silver bars woven into the window frames told the real story. She was a captive. Aria pressed her forehead against the cool glass, watching the sun set over Blackridge. Somewhere in this keep, Kael was facing his council. Somewhere, wolves were whispering about the rogue healer the Alpha King had dragged home like a trophy, or a replacement. The thought made her stomach twist. She touched her wrist, tracing the crescent moon that had stopped glowing but still hummed with latent power. That mark died with my Luna. Who had Selene been? What had she discovered that got her killed? And why? Why did Aria share the same mark, the same inexplicable power? A soft knock interrupted her spiraling thoughts. "Enter!" Aria called, expecting a servant. Instead, a woman glided into the room. She was ancient and ageless all at once, bone-white hair, eyes clouded with cataracts, skin like parchment stretched over delicate bones. but she moved with unsettling grace, her bare feet making no sound on the stone floor. The royal seer. "You're not what I expected," the old woman said, her voice like wind through hollow reeds. She tilted her head, those blind eyes seeming to look through Aria rather than at her. But then again, neither was she. "Selene," Aria breathed. "The dead Luna, yes." The seer circled Aria slowly, one gnarled hand outstretched. "I warned him, you know. Told him she was walking toward her death. He didn't listen. Kings rarely do." "Why are you here?" "Because the Alpha King commanded it. Because the council is afraid. Because—" The seer stopped directly in front of Aria, her clouded eyes suddenly focusing with unnatural clarity. "I needed to see if the whispers were true." Her hand shot out, gripping Aria's wrist with surprising strength. The mark flared silver, and the seer gasped. "2 souls," she whispered. "I see 2 souls in your aura. One burning bright, desperate to be remembered, the other hidden, fighting to be free." Ice flooded Aria's veins. "What does that mean?" "It means you are both less and more than you appear." The seer released her wrist, stepping back with something like reverence or fear in her expression. "The mark of the first moon does not lie. You are of the bloodline, child. The question is—" She paused at the door, her blind gaze somehow finding Aria's eyes. "Are you the answer to the prophecy, or its destruction?" Then she was gone, leaving only the scent of sage and secrets behind. Kael came to her chamber as the moon rose. He didn't knock, simply appeared in the doorway like a shadow-given form, still wearing his blood-spattered armor, exhaustion etched into every line of his face. "The council thinks I've lost my mind," he said without preamble. "Half of them want you executed as an impostor, the other half want you dissected to understand how you bear a mark that should be impossible." Aria crossed her arms. "And what do you want?" "Answers." Kael stepped inside, closing the door behind him. In the moonlight, his silver eyes seemed to glow. "Who are you, Aria Thorne? Where did you come from?" "I told you. I was raised by a healer named Alara, found abandoned near some old ruins when I was a child. That's all I know." "Which ruins?" The intensity in his voice made her pause. I don't know the name. Alara never told me. She just said it was a holy place that had been destroyed, that I was the only survivor." Kael's expression went carefully blank, too blank. "Describe them." "White stone, crumbling arches, a courtyard with a dried fountain shaped like—" Aria's breath caught. "Like a crescent moon." "The Silver Crest Sanctuary." Kael's voice was barely audible. Selene's final investigation led her there. She'd discovered that it wasn't just a temple. It was a hidden nursery for moon-marked children, protected by ancient wards. What happened to it? 20 years ago, it was attacked. Burned to the ground. Every child inside was presumed dead. His silver eyes found hers, and Aria saw the pieces clicking into place behind them. "You would have been an infant." The room tilted. Aria gripped the window frame for balance. "You think I'm one of those children?" "I think you're the only one who survived." Kael moved closer, his presence overwhelming in the confined space. Selene spent 3 years searching for proof that some of the children had been taken rather than killed. She died the night she finally found it. Found what? A witch coven harvesting moon-marked children for their power, for some kind of immortality ritual. His jaw clenched. "She died trying to save them, trying to find you." The words hit Aria like physical blows. A dead woman she'd never met had died looking for her. "I don't understand," she whispered. "Why would she care about me? Why would—" Kael's hand came up, hovering near her face but not quite touching. "Because you bear the same mark, the same power. Because somehow, impossibly, you're connected to her bloodline." "I'm no one. I'm just a rogue healer who—" "You created Silver Fire. His voice dropped to something raw, almost desperate. "You have power that hasn't been seen in generations. You bear a mark that should have died with Selene." His fingers finally made contact, brushing her cheek with devastating gentleness. "You are anything but no one." Aria's breath caught. This close, she could see the grief carved into his features, the loneliness he wore like armor, could feel the dangerous pull between them, grief calling to grief, isolation recognizing isolation. "I'm not her," she said again, but this time it sounded less like a declaration and more like a plea. "I can't be what you lost." "I know." Kael's thumb traced her cheekbone, and Aria hated how her body leaned into the touch. "But maybe—" Glass shattered. They spun as something crashed through the window. Not a rogue, not a wolf, something worse. It moved like smoke given form, a figure wrapped in shadow and malice, its eyes burning red in a face that seemed to shift and blur. Magic crackled around it, dark and corrupted, making Aria's mark flare in warning. A witch-bound assassin! Kael threw himself in front of Aria as the creature lunged, his claws extended, his wolf surging to the surface, but the assassin was faster. It drove past him, skeletal fingers reaching for Aria's throat. And then it stopped, inches from her face, trembling. Its red eyes widening with something like recognition. When it spoke, its voice was a chorus of whispers, layered and wrong. "Ariana Silvercrest, the lost twin, the hidden half, the coven sends its regards." Then it burst into flames, silver flames that consumed it from the inside out, leaving nothing but ash and the acrid smell of burned magic. Silence crashed over the room. Kael turned to Aria, his face pale, his silver eyes wide with shock. "What did it call you?" he demanded. But Aria couldn't answer, couldn't breathe, could only stare at the ashes scattered across the floor and hear those impossible words echoing in her skull. The lost twin, the hidden half. Selene had a sister, and somehow, Aria was her. Some truths are buried for protection. Others are buried because they're too dangerous to let live. The ride to Silvercrest Sanctuary took 3 days. 3 days of Kael's warriors flanking them like a funeral procession. 3 days of whispered conversations that died whenever Aria drew near. 3 days of Kael watching her with those silver eyes that seemed to catalog every breath, every gesture, searching for proof of something he couldn't name. The lost twin. The words haunted her, kept her awake at night in whatever inn or camp they stopped at, her mind replaying that moment when the assassin had called her by a name she'd never heard before. Ariana Silvercrest. Not Thorne. Not the orphan found in the ruins. Silvercrest. The same name as the sanctuary, the same bloodline as— "We're here," Kael said quietly, pulling his horse to a stop. Aria looked up and felt her heart stutter. The ruins rose from the forest like broken teeth, white stone bleached by sun and time. Arches that had once soared toward the sky now crumbled earthward. Walls carved with intricate moon phases stood half-collapsed, reclaimed by ivy and shadow. But it was the silence that struck her most, not peaceful, haunted, like the very air remembered screaming. 20 years, Kael murmured, dismounting. His hand rested on the pommel of his sword, not drawing it, but ready, always ready. And it still feels like yesterday. Aria slid from her horse, her boots crunching on ground that looked like it had been scorched black. "You were here? When it happened?" "I was 16. My father brought me to the aftermath." His jaw tightened. "Lesson in mortality," he called it. "Wanted me to understand what happens when ancient protections fail." He started forward, and Aria followed here, Ronan and 2 other warriors trailing behind at a careful distance. The courtyard opened before them like a wound that refused to heal. The fountain stood at its center, exactly as Aria remembered from fragmented dreams. A crescent moon carved from marble, dry and cracked, its basin filled with dead leaves and the remnants of offerings left by those who still believed the goddess listened. But it was the scorch marks that made Aria's blood run cold. They were everywhere. On the stones, the walls, the ground. Not random, deliberate. Symbols burned into the very foundation of the sanctuary, dark magic seared into holy ground. And at the center of each symbol, carved with terrible precision, a child's handprint. "Oh gods," Aria breathed. 73 children. Kael's voice was hollow. That's how many were supposed to be protected here. We found 58 bodies. The rest, he gestured to the empty spaces where handprints marked the stones, vanished. Aria moved toward the nearest mark, drawn by something she couldn't name. Her fingers hovered over the small handprint burned into white stone, and the world shifted. Screaming, so much screaming. Smoke and silver fire consuming everything. A woman with dark hair and desperate eyes, pressing a crying infant into someone's arms. "Take her! Hide her! They cannot have both!" Aria gasped, jerking her hand back. The vision shattered, leaving her dizzy and sick. "What did you see?" Kael was beside her instantly, his hand on her elbow, steadying her. "A woman. She was trying to save someone. A baby." Aria's voice shook. "She said they cannot have both." Kael went very still. "Both." He released her and strode toward what remained of the main temple, his movements sharp with purpose. Aria hurried after him, past collapsed columns and shattered stained glass, into a chamber where moonlight filtered through the ruined ceiling. At the center of the room stood a stone altar, its surface covered in ash and debris. Kael began sweeping it away with urgent, controlled movements, revealing intricate carvings beneath. "There," he said, pointing to a passage etched in the old language. "Can you read it?" Aria leaned closer, her mentor's lessons surfacing through the fear. The script was ancient, formal, the kind used for prophecies and binding oaths. "When the goddess's light splits in two," she read slowly, "twin marks shall be born beneath the same moon, one to bind the packs in unity, one to—" Her voice faltered. "One to what?" Kael demanded. "One to shatter the veil between life and death." Aria looked up, meeting his silver gaze. "It's a prophecy about 2 moon-marked children born at the same time." "Sisters," Kael said softly. 2 sisters with the same mark, the same power. One meant to save the packs, the other meant to destroy them. The implications crashed over Aria like a wave. The sanctuary wasn't just protecting moon-marked children, it was keeping us apart. Selene and— She couldn't finish, couldn't give voice to the impossible truth taking shape between them. Ronan appeared in the doorway, his expression grim. "My lord, we found something, in the old sanctuary vault beneath the west wing." The vault was sealed with magic so old it predated the kingdom itself, wards carved into stone, powered by moonlight and blood oaths. The kind of protections that should have been unbreakable, should have been. But the door stood open, its seals cracked and bleeding residual magic into the air. "Someone got here first," Ronan muttered, his hand on his sword. "Recently." Kael moved forward, every muscle coiled for a fight. Aria stayed close, her mark beginning to glow with warning, or recognition. The vault was small, barely larger than a burial chamber. Empty shelves lined the walls where sacred texts and artifacts had once been stored. All of it gone, looted or destroyed. All except— There. Aria pointed to the far corner, where something glinted in the dim light. A dagger. It lay on a stone pedestal, its blade etched with sigils that pulsed with faint silver light. The pommel was wrapped in leather worn smooth by use, and embedded in the crossguard was a moonstone that seemed to hold its own inner glow. Kael approached it slowly, reverently. When he lifted it, his hands were shaking. "This was Selene's," he whispered. "I gave it to her on our bonding day. She never went anywhere without it." "Why would she leave it here?" Aria asked. "She wouldn't, unless—" Kael turned the blade, examining it more closely. "There, on the tang." Aria moved beside him, close enough to see the tiny inscription etched beneath the leather wrapping. "To the second mark, run." The words were written in Selene's hand. Aria didn't know how she knew that, but she did. Felt it in her bones, in the mark that suddenly burned hot against her wrist. "She knew," Kael said, his voice breaking. "She knew you existed, knew you were in danger." This was her trying to warn you." "But I never came here. I never—" The ground trembled. Dust rained from the ceiling as the vault shuddered, ancient magic destabilizing. The wards that had been cracked were now collapsing, their power turning inward, feeding on itself. "Out!" Kael grabbed Aria's arm, shoving the dagger into his belt. "Now!" They ran. Behind them, the vault imploded with a sound like thunder, sealing itself in a tomb of rubble and broken magic. The force of it threw them forward, and Aria felt Kael's body curve around hers, taking the brunt of falling debris. When the dust settled, they lay tangled together in the sanctuary courtyard, both gasping for breath. Aria pushed herself up on shaking arms and saw blood, Kael's blood, staining his side where a jagged piece of stone had torn through his armor. "You're hurt," she said, already reaching for him. "It's nothing." "Shut up." Her hands found the wound, and power flared from her palms before she could think to stop it. Silver light poured from her mark, flowing into him, knitting torn flesh and broken bone with a magic that felt both foreign and achingly familiar. Kael stared at her, transfixed. "How are you doing that?" "I don't know." Aria's hands trembled as the healing magic responded to her will, or maybe to something deeper, something that recognized him, claimed him, marked him as hers to protect. "I've never been able to heal this way before, never had enough power to—" She stopped, realizing what she'd just admitted, that she was stronger here, in this place of death and prophecy, near him. Kael caught her wrists gently, stopping the flow of magic. The wound was healed, leaving only a thin silver scar. "You saved my life," he said quietly. "Again. Don't make it a habit of needing saving, Alpha King." Something flickered in his eyes, warmth, gratitude, and beneath it all, that dangerous pull she'd been trying to ignore. His thumb brushed over her mark, and Aria's breath hitched. "If you're really her sister," Kael said, his voice raw with emotion, "if you're really the other half of the prophecy, then what?" Aria pulled back, fear sharpening her words. "Then I'm either your salvation or your doom. Then everything Selene died for was to keep me away from you, from this kingdom, from whatever fate that prophecy demands? Then I need to keep you alive." His silver eyes held hers with fierce intensity, "no matter what it costs." Before Aria could respond, Ronan's shout cut through the air. "My lord! The sanctuary seal! It's breaking!" They turned to see the courtyard fountain beginning to glow, its dried basin filling with impossible silver light. The crescent moon at its center was rotating, ancient mechanisms grinding to life after 20 years of silence. And as it turned, it revealed a chamber beneath. A hidden vault that Selene herself had sealed, with one final message carved into its entrance. "To my sister, whom I never knew. Forgive me. They're coming for you. Run." Monsters don't always announce themselves with fangs and fire. Sometimes they arrive in silence, wearing the faces of forgotten family. The hidden chamber beneath the sanctuary had yielded only questions, and Selene's dagger, which now hung at Aria's hip like a talisman she didn't understand. The ride back to Blackridge Keep was heavy with unspoken words. Kael's silver eyes constantly finding her across the firelight each night they camped. To my sister, whom I never knew. Sister. The word felt foreign in Aria's mouth, like a language she'd forgotten how to speak. How could she mourn someone she'd never met? How could she carry the weight of a woman who'd died trying to protect her? But as the keep's towers came into view on the third day, Aria felt the mark on her wrist pulse with warning. Something was wrong. The gates stood open, not in welcome, but in chaos. Smoke curled from the eastern battlements. Warriors ran through the courtyard with weapons drawn, and above it all, a sound that made Aria's blood freeze. Children screaming. Kael spurred his horse forward without a word, and Aria followed, her heart hammering against her ribs. The council chamber was a war zone. Shadow-bound creatures, the same twisted things that had attacked her cottage, swarmed through broken windows. Not 3 or 4, but dozens, their red eyes burning with malice as they tore through guards and nobles alike. At the center of it all stood a woman. She was beautiful in the way poisoned flowers are beautiful, dark hair cascading like a waterfall of midnight, skin pale as death, eyes that glowed with sickly green light. Power radiated from her in waves, corrupted magic that made the air taste of rot and copper. Morgath. Aria knew her name the way you know nightmares, instinctively, viscerally. The Witch Queen smiled, and it was a terrible thing to witness. Alpha King, she purred, her voice echoing unnaturally. How kind of you to finally arrive. I was beginning to think you'd abandoned your people to save your little stray. Kael shifted instantly, his wolf surging to the surface. You have 10 seconds to leave my kingdom before I tear out your throat. So dramatic. Morgath gestured lazily, and a shadow-bound lunged toward a cowering group of nobles. A child, no more than 6 years old, stood frozen in its path, too terrified to run. Aria moved without thinking. She threw herself between the creature and the child, Selene's dagger flashing in her hand. The blade met shadow flesh and the thing shrieked, recoiling as silver light flared along the etched sigils. But more were coming. Too many. The child clung to Aria's legs, sobbing, and something ancient stirred in Aria's chest. Not memory. Instinct. The same instinct that had created silver fire, that had healed Kael's wounds. Words rose in her throat, unbidden. A language she'd never learned but somehow knew. Lunae fili, ego voco te, argenti flamma, me defende. Children of the moon, I call you, silver flame, defend me. Light exploded from Aria's mark, not wild like before, but controlled, a perfect sphere of silver fire that surrounded her and the child. The shadowbound hit the barrier and burned, their screams echoing through the chamber as ancient magic consumed them. Every eye in the room turned to Aria. Morgath's smile widened. Well, well, the lost twin has teeth after all. What do you want? Aria demanded, her voice steadier than she felt. What I've always wanted, child. The Witch Queen's green eyes gleamed with hunger. You. Your sister tried so hard to hide you, to keep you from your birthright, but Selene always was the noble one. The weak one. Kael snarled, but Morgath merely laughed. Deliver Ariana Silvercrest to me by the next new moon, she said, her voice suddenly cold as winter, or I will paint this kingdom in the blood of every child within its borders, starting with the royal nursery. She vanished in a swirl of corrupted magic, her shadow-bound dissolving with her. Silence crashed over the chamber like a physical weight. Then chaos erupted, nobles shouting, warriors securing the perimeter, healers rushing to tend the wounded. Through it all, Kael stood frozen, staring at Aria with an expression she couldn't read. The child still clung to her legs, trembling. It's all right, Aria murmured, kneeling to the girl's level. You're safe now. You used Lady Selene's words, the child whispered. My mama told me about them. The protection chant only the Luna knew. Aria's blood turned to ice. She looked up at Kael and saw the confirmation in his silver eyes. She'd spoken words only Selene should have known. "You need to tell me the truth." Kael's voice was quiet, but it filled his private study with the weight of command. He'd dismissed everyone, even Ronan, who'd argued until Kael's alpha authority had shut him down. Now it was just the two of them, a bottle of whiskey neither had touched, and too many questions bleeding between them. "I am telling you the truth," Aria said, exhaustion fraying her patience. "I don't know how I knew those words. I don't know how I have this power. I don't know—" "What you are," Kael finished. He moved to the window, his back to her, tension radiating from every line of his body. "Because I'm starting to understand. And it terrifies me." "Then we're both terrified." He turned, and the raw emotion in his face stole her breath. "Do you know what Ronan told me on the ride back? He said you're either the greatest gift the goddess has given this kingdom, or the weapon that will destroy it. And what do you think?" Kael crossed the space between them in 3 strides. His hands came up to frame her face, thumbs brushing her cheekbones with devastating gentleness. "I think," he said roughly, "that I'm falling for someone who might be destined to kill us all, and I can't bring myself to care." Aria's heart stopped. Stopped again. "Kael, I know it's insane. I know she's only been dead 3 years. I know you're her sister, if the prophecy is true. I know every reason this is wrong." His forehead dropped to hers. "But when I look at you, I don't see Selene's ghost. I see someone fighting just as hard as I am to understand what fate has thrown at us." Aria's hands came up to grip his wrists, anchoring herself. "We can't. This, whatever this is, it's not real. It's just grief and prophecy and—" "Liar." The word was barely a breath. "You feel it too. This pull, this recognition, like our souls have been searching for each other." He was right. God's help her, he was right. From the moment he'd grabbed her wrist in her cottage, something had clicked into place, something that had nothing to do with marks or magic, and everything to do with 2 lonely people finding someone who understood what it meant to be haunted. Before she could respond, a knock shattered the moment. "My lord," Ronan's voice was tight with urgency. "We found something. In the catacombs beneath the palace. A door sealed with blood magic. Magic that only responds to—" He stopped, his dark eyes finding Aria. "To royal blood," Kael finished grimly. The catacombs smelled of earth and secrets. Torches flickered along walls carved with the names of dead alphas, their queens, their legacies. Aria followed Kael deeper, past burial chambers and forgotten vaults, until they reached a section that looked like it hadn't been disturbed in decades. But the door at the end of the corridor was humming with power. Silver light leaked from the seams in the stone, pulsing in rhythm with— "My heartbeat," Aria whispered. Kael drew his sword. "Ronan found it 3 hours ago. Whatever's behind that door, it's been waiting. For you." Aria approached the door, her mark beginning to glow in response. There was no handle, no keyhole. Just a smooth surface carved with a single symbol, a crescent moon split in 2. Her hand moved of its own accord, pressing against the cold stone. The mark on her wrist flared, and she felt the door taste her blood, analyzing it, recognizing it, accepting it. The door swung open with a whisper of ancient hinges. Inside was a study frozen in time, books stacked on every surface, maps pinned to walls, and at the center, a desk covered in Selene's handwriting, notes about missing children, about the Silvercrest Sanctuary, about a prophecy that ended in blood. Aria stepped inside, drawn to the desk as if by invisible threads. A journal lay open, its pages covered in desperate scrawl. "If you're reading this, sister, then I failed. Failed to find you before they did. Failed to stop the coven. Failed to break the prophecy that will demand one of us surrender our soul for the other to ascend. I'm so sorry." I'm so sorry I couldn't save you." Tears blurred Aria's vision. She touched the page, and the room exploded with light. A figure materialized above the desk, translucent, shimmering, wearing Selene's face, her sister's face. Ariana. Selene's voice was an echo, a memory given form by blood magic and desperate love. If this message has awakened, then you've survived. Thank the goddess. Aria couldn't speak, could only stare at the woman who looked so much like her. Same dark hair, same defiant chin, same mark glowing on her wrist. Our aunt, Morgath, she's the one who destroyed the sanctuary, who took the children. She needs both our souls to complete the ritual, to become the goddess reborn. Selene's image flickered. I sealed you away, had you hidden, hoping she'd never find you. But the prophecy... Her voice broke. On the next eclipse, she'll come for us both. You must run, sister. Run and never let her... The image shattered, and in its place, carved into the desk in letters that burned with dying magic, the eclipse is in 3 days. Family is supposed to mean protection, shelter, love. But sometimes, family is the monster that's been hunting you all along. The revelation hung in Selene's hidden study, like smoke that refused to dissipate. Aria stared at the desk where her sister's spectral warning had shattered, at the words burned into ancient wood. The eclipse is in 3 days. 3 days until Morgath came to claim what she believed was her birthright. 2 souls, merged into one, ascending to godhood on a river of stolen power. We need to move. Kael's voice cut through her spiraling thoughts. His hand found the small of her back, grounding. The council needs to hear this. All of it. Aria turned to face him, and something in her expression made him pause. They're going to want me dead, she said quietly. You know that, don't you? Your nobles, your advisors, they'll say I'm too dangerous to live, that the kingdom's safety demands. They can demand all they want. Kael's eyes flashed silver in the torchlight. I'm still their king. But even as he said it, Aria heard the doubt beneath his certainty, saw the weight of impossible choices settling on shoulders that had already carried too much grief. The council chamber felt like a trial. 20 wolves sat in judgment, alphas from the major packs, nobles who'd served the crown for generations, warriors whose loyalty had been tested in blood. And at the head of the table, Kael stood with the bearing of someone who'd learned to wear authority like armor. Aria stood beside him, chin lifted despite the hostility radiating from every corner of the room. Let me understand this correctly, said Lord Aldrich, the silver-haired alpha of the Northern Range. His voice dripped with barely concealed contempt. This rogue claims to be the dead Luna's twin sister, claims to be targeted by a witch queen seeking godhood, and rather than eliminate the threat, you've brought her into the heart of our kingdom? I've brought her under my protection, Kael corrected, his tone sharp enough to draw blood. The same protection I'd extend to any wolf of royal blood. Royal blood? Lady Vesper, a steel-eyed strategist from the Eastern Territories, leaned forward. Based on what evidence? A birthmark? Convenient visions? The word of a dead woman's ghost? Based on power that saved half this council from shadow-bound assassins 3 hours ago, Ronan interjected from his position behind Kael's chair. Or did you all forget that part? Murmurs rippled through the chamber, some grateful, others suspicious. Which proves nothing except that she has magic, Aldrich countered. Magic that could just as easily be used against us. My lord, with respect, you're thinking with your grief, not your crown. This woman appears bearing your dead mate's mark, speaking her words, and you've accepted her story without question. Kael's hands flattened on the table, claws extending slightly. Careful, Aldrich. Someone needs to say it. The Northern Alpha stood, his voice carrying to every corner of the chamber. The prophecy she speaks of, 2 souls meant to either save or destroy the packs, demands a choice. And the safest choice, the only choice that protects this kingdom, is to kill her before the eclipse, Lady Vesper finished coldly. Execute the threat. End the prophecy. Silence fell like a blade. Aria felt the room's judgment pressing against her skin, suffocating. She'd known this was coming, had prepared herself for it during the long walk from Selene's study, but hearing it spoken aloud, hearing them debate her death like a tactical maneuver— "No." Kael's voice cracked through the chamber like thunder. He straightened to his full height, and suddenly he wasn't just their king, he was the Alpha, the predator at the top of the hierarchy, reminding them all exactly who commanded this kingdom. "The prophecy speaks of 2 moon-marked souls," he said, each word measured and absolute. "Selene was one. Aria is the other. If you kill her, if you destroy half of what the goddess herself created, what do you think happens to the balance?" "We survive," Aldrich said flatly. "Do we?" Kael's silver eyes swept the room. "The mark of the first moon appears once in a generation. It's the goddess's gift to the Pax, her promise that will never be abandoned. Selene bore it. Now Aria does. And you want to execute her? Spit in the face of divine will because you're too afraid to see where fate leads?" He moved around the table, his presence commanding every eye. "If she dies," he said softly, dangerously, "the moon dies with her. And when the goddess turns her face from us, when the Pax fall into chaos without her blessing, I will make sure you all live long enough to regret your cowardice." The threat hung in the air, undeniable. Lady Vesper was the first to bow her head, then Ronan. Then, slowly, the others followed, some with genuine submission, others with barely concealed resentment. All except Aldrich, who held Kael's gaze for a long moment before finally inclining his head. "As you command, my king," he said. "But know this, if she brings ruin to this kingdom, her blood will be on your hands." "Then I'll wear it gladly." Kael turned back to Aria, and the fierce protectiveness in his expression made her chest ache. "Ronan, double the guard on the East Tower. No one enters without my explicit permission, and summon the War Council." Thunder crashed, not from the sky, from the stones themselves. The council chamber shuddered as dark magic slammed against the keep's wards. Windows exploded inward, showering the room with glass. And through the opening poured a wind that smelled of rot and graveyard earth. Aria's mark flared with warning. Too late. Shadows coalesced at the center of the room, forming into a figure that made every wolf's hackles rise. Morgath. The Witch Queen looked even more terrible here, in the heart of Kael's power. Her green eyes glowed with malice, and when she smiled, Aria saw the family resemblance. The same sharp cheekbones, the same defiant chin. "Aunt." "How touching," Morgath purred. "The king defending his little stray, but I'm afraid family business can't wait for your war councils and noble debates." Kael moved to intercept, but Morgath gestured lazily. Invisible force slammed him back against the wall, pinning him there with magic that crackled like corrupted lightning. "No!" Aria lunged forward, but shadow-bound creatures materialized around her, their clawed hands reaching. And then she was falling. The world twisted, reality bending around Morgath's dark magic. Aria felt herself being pulled through space, through the barriers between here and elsewhere, the council chamber dissolving into smoke and screaming. A child's voice, singing, "Luna's light, keep me bright, through the dark and endless night." Selene's voice. The memory hit Aria like a physical blow. She was small again, barely old enough to walk, sitting in a white stone nursery while a woman with kind eyes braided her hair. And beside her, another little girl, identical, mirror-perfect, sang the lullaby their mother had taught them. "Sisters. We were always sisters." Fire erupted, screaming, the woman with kind eyes shoving them apart, pressing baby Aria into someone else's arms. "Take her! Hide her! They cannot have both!" The memory shattered as Aria hit solid ground. She gasped, her lungs burning, her mark blazing with silver fire. When her vision cleared, she found herself in a place that lived in nightmares, the Eclipse Altar. It stood at the center of a ruined temple, carved from black stone that seemed to drink in moonlight. Sigils covered every surface, old magic, blood magic, the kind that demanded sacrifice to function. And at the four corners of the altar, chains hung waiting. 2 sets of chains, one for each twin. Aria struggled to her feet, Selene's dagger somehow still at her hip. Her entire body ached from the forced translocation, but she forced herself to stand, to face the Witch Queen who'd destroyed everything. Morgath descended the altar steps with the grace of a predator, her corrupted magic swirling around her like living shadow. "Do you know what your mother's mistake was?" she asked conversationally. "She thought love could protect you, thought hiding you from your destiny would somehow save you from fate." Her smile was poison. "But the prophecy cannot be denied, child. 2 souls born of the goddess's light, 2 halves of the same whole." "You killed them!" Aria's voice shook with rage. "The children at Silvercrest, my mother, Selene, I freed them." Morgath's eyes flashed. "From the burden of mortality, from the weakness of the flesh. Your sister understood that in the end, when I cut her throat beneath the blood moon. She finally saw the beauty of ascension." White-hot fury exploded through Aria. She drew Selene's dagger, silver light blazing along its etched blade, but Morgath only laughed. "Oh, little wolf, did you think you were the first to resist?" She gestured, and shadow-bound creatures emerged from the ruins, dozens of them, surrounding Aria in a circle of red eyes and twisted magic. "Your sister fought too, carved half my face open before the poison took hold." She traced a faint scar along her cheek. "She died screaming your name, begging me to spare the twin she'd never met." Aria's vision blurred with tears, with rage, with grief for a sister she'd never known but had lost everything trying to protect her. "Kael will come for me," she said through clenched teeth. "Oh, I'm counting on it." Morgath's smile widened. "The Alpha King, charging to rescue his mate's ghost. It's almost poetic. But by the time he arrives," she gestured to the sky, where clouds were already beginning to shift, revealing the first sliver of the eclipse moon. "You and I will have already begun the ritual. And when the moon goes dark, when the veil between life and death tears open—" Morgath's hand shot out, seizing Aria's wrist where the mark blazed defiant and bright. "We will become what your sister never had the courage to embrace." Her grip tightened, magic burning against magic. "Welcome home, child of the first moon," Morgath whispered, her breath cold against Aria's ear. "Let's finish what your mother started." In Blackridge Keep, Kael tore free of the binding spell with a roar that shook the foundations. His wolf surged to the surface, silver eyes blazing with primal fury. The council scattered as alpha power rolled off him in waves, the kind of dominance that made submission instinctive. "Ronan," his voice was barely human, "gather every warrior, every pack, every wolf who can hold a weapon." "My lord, now!" Kael's claws extended fully, his canines dropping. "Morgath wants a war? Then we'll give her one she'll never forget." He turned to the shattered window, staring out at storm clouds gathering on the horizon. "I'm coming for you, Aria," he whispered. "Hold on. Just hold on. I'll burn the world to bring you back. Some destinies are written in starlight. Others are forged in the defiance of those who refuse to be pawns." The eclipse moon hung above the ruined temple like a wound in the sky, crimson and swollen, bleeding light across the altar where Aria struggled against chains that burned with corrupted magic. Morgath moved around her with ritualistic precision, drawing sigils in the air with fingers that dripped shadow. The shadow-bound creatures formed a circle, their bodies swaying in rhythm with words spoken in a language older than kingdoms. "You should feel honored," Morgath said, her voice echoing with unnatural resonance. "Few mortals glimpse true ascension, fewer still become its vessel." Aria yanked against the chains, feeling them sear into her wrists. The mark of the first moon blazed in response, not with healing light, but with agony, like her soul was being pulled apart thread by thread. "Fight all you want, child." Morgath pressed one pale hand against Aria's mark, and silver light exploded between them. "Your sister fought too." "It changed nothing. The prophecy demands two souls become one, and since Selene is already with the goddess," she smiled, cruel and hungry, "I'll simply pull her through you." The ritual began. Aria screamed as power tore through her body, foreign, invasive, ancient. She felt Selene's presence flooding her consciousness like water through broken glass. Memories that weren't hers, a childhood in marble halls, a bonding ceremony beneath summer stars, Kael's laugh before grief had stolen it away, and beneath it all, Selene's voice, desperate, loving, broken. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, sister. I tried to stop this, tried to save you, but the prophecy won't let us go." "No!" Aria fought against the merging, against the dissolution of herself into someone else's ghost. "You don't get to erase me. You don't get to—" Thunder cracked across the sky. Not from the storm, from war. Through the haze of pain, Aria heard them, howls rising like a symphony of rage. Dozens of wolves, maybe hundreds, their voices joining in a battle cry that shook the very stones of the temple. Kael's army. Morgath's head snapped toward the sound, her concentration fracturing for just a moment. And in that heartbeat of distraction, he came. Kael exploded through the circle of shadowbound like an avenging god, his wolf form massive and terrible, silver eyes blazing with primal fury. Claws tore through corrupted flesh, fangs found shadow throats. He was blood and moonlight and unstoppable violence. Behind him, Ronan and the pack warriors crashed into the temple ruins, engaging Morgath's creatures in brutal combat. Steel rang against claw, magic crackled against fur and fang, but Kael's focus never wavered. He shifted mid-leap, landing in human form between Aria and Morgath, his body a living shield. Blood streaked his face from a dozen wounds, but he stood unwavering. "Get away from her!" Morgath laughed, the sound like breaking bones. "How noble. The grieving king, come to save his replacement Luna. But you're too late, Wolf. The ritual has already begun. Her soul is mine." "Wrong." Kael's hand found Aria's, fingers intertwining despite the chains, despite the magic trying to tear them apart. "Her soul was never yours to claim." The moment their skin touched, something shattered. Power exploded between them, not silver, not corrupted green, but something new. White gold light that blazed like a second sun, pouring from their joined hands, burning away Morgath's ritual circles. Aria gasped as she felt it. The bond. Not the forced merging of the prophecy, but a choice made in defiance of fate. Two souls recognizing each other not because destiny demanded it, but because they chose it. Through the connection, she felt everything. Kael's grief for Selene, his fear of losing someone else, his desperate hope that maybe, love didn't have to end in tragedy. And beneath it all, the raw truth he'd been afraid to speak. "I don't want Selene's ghost. I want you. Just you." "No!" Morgath shrieked, her composure cracking. "This isn't how the prophecy works. Two marked souls must merge to choose their bond." Aria's voice rang clear despite the pain. Through the ritual's haze, through Selene's memories flooding her mind, she finally understood. That's what it means. Not forced fusion. Choice. She looked at Kael. at the silver eyes that had first grabbed her in anger and now held her in something far more dangerous. The prophecy says 2 moon-marked souls will either bind the packs in unity or shatter the veil between life and death, Aria said, her voice growing stronger. Selene thought it meant we had to merge, become one being, but she was wrong. The chains around her wrists began to crack, light pouring from the fractures. It means we choose who we bind ourselves to, who we give our power to. She squeezed Kael's hand, feeling his strength flow into her, feeling her magic answer and amplify. Not fate, not prophecy. Choice. I choose you, Kael growled, and the bond between them ignited like wildfire. And I choose him, Aria declared, turning to face Morgath with eyes that now blazed silver white. Not darkness, not ascension, not your corrupted idea of godhood. She pulled on the bond, on Kael's alpha power and her own divine heritage, weaving them together into something the prophecy had never anticipated. Free will made manifest. Silver-white fire erupted from Aria in a wave that consumed everything. The chains shattered, the altar cracked. Morgath screamed as the flames caught her, burning away centuries of stolen magic, of harvested souls, of children's lives twisted into fuel for her ambition. No, no, you'll doom us all. Without the goddess's control, the packs will fall into freedom, Aria finished. They'll fall into freedom. The fire reached its crescendo, and Aria felt it. The breaking. Not just of Morgath's power, but of something far older. The threads that bound every moon-marked wolf to the goddess's will, to destinies chosen before birth, to fates carved in starlight, all of it shattered. Morgath dissolved into ash, her final scream echoing across the temple ruins. The shadowbound collapsed like puppets with cut strings, and across the kingdom, every wolf with divine blood felt the sudden, terrifying lightness of choice restored. The eclipse began to pass, crimson giving way to silver once more. Aria sagged against her chains. No, against Kael, who caught her as the power drained away, leaving only exhaustion and the trembling aftermath of rewriting prophecy itself. "I've got you," he murmured, lowering them both to the ground. His arms wrapped around her, solid and real and alive. "You're safe. His voice broke. Aria lifted her head, meeting silver eyes that held 1,000 unsaid things. Around them, the battle had ended. Warriors stood in stunned silence, staring at the altar where impossible magic had just unmade the rules of their world. "You weren't her," Kael whispered, his forehead touching hers. Blood and dirt and tears mixed between them, and it was the most honest moment Aria had ever witnessed. "You were never Selene. You were never a replacement, or a second chance." His hand came up to cup her face with devastating gentleness. "You were mine. From the moment you defied me in that cottage. From the first time you looked at me like I was just a man, not a king drowning in grief. You were always yours to give, and you gave yourself to me anyway." "And you chose me back," Aria breathed, "even knowing what it would cost, what we'd break. I'd break 1,000 prophecies for you." He kissed her then, not gentle, not careful, but fierce and claiming and alive with the kind of desperation that came from nearly losing everything. Aria kissed him back, tasting blood and triumph and the promise of a future they'd stolen from fate itself. When they finally pulled apart, the moon hung silver and whole above them. The goddess's influence, broken. The prophecy, rewritten. The kingdom, free. Epilogue. 6 weeks later. Blackridge Keep had never looked more alive. Aria stood on the eastern balcony, watching the courtyard below where wolves from a dozen packs mingled freely, no longer bound by divine hierarchy, but choosing their allegiances, their paths, their futures. It hadn't been easy. The council had fought the changes. Some packs had splintered, unable to adapt to a world without celestial guidance. But others, most, had embraced their newfound autonomy with fierce joy. Kael's arms wrapped around her from behind, his chin resting on her shoulder. No formal bond yet. They were taking it slow, learning each other without prophecy's shadow hanging over them. But the connection was there, chosen and cherished. "Ronan's taking bets on when we'll make it official," he murmured against her ear. Aria laughed. "Tell him to be patient. We've got time now, all the time in the world." About that, the guardroom door burst open. A warrior stumbled in, eyes wild, gasping for breath. "My lord, there's someone at the gates! A wanderer! He swallowed hard. "She's carrying something. Says it's urgent. Says the kingdom is in danger." Kael tensed, already moving. Aria followed, her mark tingling with warning. Not pain, but awareness. They reached the gates to find a woman waiting. Ancient, wrapped in tattered robes that might have once been ceremonial. But it was what she held that made Aria's blood freeze. A fragment of stone, carved with a crescent moon, still pulsing with residual divine power. "Where did you get that?" Kael demanded. The woman lifted her head, revealing eyes that glowed with faint silver. Not corrupted, but not entirely mortal either. "From the celestial sanctum," she said, her voice echoing strangely. "The goddess's true temple, hidden beyond the mortal veil. It's been sealed for 1,000 years, but 6 weeks ago," she thrust the fragment toward them, "the seals broke. When you shattered her control over the marked wolves, when you rejected her divine will." Her smile was thin and terrified. "You didn't free the kingdom from the goddess? You woke her up." Silence crashed over the courtyard. "What are you saying?" Aria whispered. "The moon goddess isn't gone, child. She's been sleeping, letting her power work through bloodlines and prophecies while she dreamed." The woman's eyes held centuries of knowledge and fresh horror. "But now she's awakening, and she is furious." She dropped the fragment at their feet, where it pulsed with light that felt nothing like blessing. "She's coming," the wanderer breathed, "not as savior or divine mother, as wrath incarnate, and this time—" Thunder rolled across a cloudless sky. "She's bringing judgment for the wolves who dared defy the divine order." Kael's hand found Aria's, their bond flaring with shared determination. They'd rewritten one prophecy. They'd face a goddess if they had to, together. Thank you so much for watching till the end. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our next upload. I'd also love to hear your thoughts. Tell me in the comments what you think about this story and where you're watching from. Your support means a lot and helps us keep creating more stories like this. Until next time, stay safe, stay inspired.